All I know is that this is a heavy-aged guitar from the Gibson Murphy Labs. And then it costs $8,000. But my question is it worth it? I have to start by saying that I've never fundamentally been a fan of the idea that I would pay somebody else to age my guitar. Call me an old fogey, because I can absolutely mess up my guitar perfectly fine on my own. So when I first heard about the Murphy Labs from Gibson, charging thousands and thousands of dollars for these vintage correct, vintage feeling and looking instruments, my gut reaction was, nah, just not for me. I don't need that. I'll buy something vintage. I'll take my own cigarette and put it out on my own guitar and hit my own guitar headstock into the cymbal stand at my next gig myself. I can do that. But after playing a bunch of Murphy Lab guitars, if I put my feelings aside for my disdain of paying for an aged instrument, paying for an instrument that's meant to be something it's not, every single Murphy Lab guitar I've played has been awesome. If you'd asked me before, it's stupid. I'm open-minded, put them in my hands, and I was just in disbelief playing guitar after guitar being like, okay, this is way more than I can afford, but these are great. Oh, I just needed to feel better. I can taste the happiness. And then when Sam Ash sent me a 58 Les Paul from the Murphy Labs, I couldn't deny how unbelievable it felt and how much it absolutely looked, sounded, and felt like a vintage instrument. That Les Paul was something just magic. And even my friend Paul Lourenco, the drummer in my band Lost Symphony, he would never buy $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 guitar, and he's exactly the kind of guy that would be upset by a $6,500 guitar or an $8,000 guitar, which is totally why I put it in his hands, because I wanted to know his response. Because if he feels like me, where conceptually the Murphy Lab seems just silly, but then you play the guitar and you go, oh my God, wow, this feels amazing. This sounds incredible. And then you have to say to yourself, well, yeah, they're doing something magical at the Murphy Labs. They are able to make these vintage correct instruments feel, play, look just like the real thing. I had my buddy Paul Lourenco come down and play that Les Paul. I thought maybe I would have him unbox this guitar and see his response right from the beginning. Take a peek. I would have to think that letting you open my Gibson box, it's like, you know, you want to open my Christmas presents for me? All right, dude.
I don't get a lot of practice at this like you do or anything. People don't just send me guitars.
You know, that's why I'm sharing in the wealth.
Well, I appreciate
that wonderful feeling that Sam Ash gives me.
It is. Interesting.
Interesting. What could they have gotten us, Paul?
Looks a little taller than your average Les Paul. Thinking hollow body. Ooh.
Oh, wow, dude.
That's really nice. That's awesome. Love that smell. Very nice.
So what smell are we talking about, Paul?
That new old guitar smell.
What's your first impression of this thing?
Really cool. I like all the aged components and stuff. It's really nice.
You said you didn't like aged guitars.
I didn't expect it to have the checking. Like I've seen, you know, relict guitars, but I didn't know that they went so far as to get the checking and all that in there. But this one's definitely cool.
Was that the Purple Rain chord?
Yeah.
Well, if you're gonna spend $8,000, it should look like this. The first thing that I thought when Paul pulled this guitar out of the case was that it looks exactly like my real 1959. I know what some of the best guitars play like. I own two holy grails. And when I saw this, it was like its twin. But there is some difference because this is a 1958 tobacco burst, heavy-aged Murphy Labs ES335. They only made 130 of them in tobacco burst, and they made 130 in a tri-burst and 130 in a dirty blonde for the 130th anniversary of Gibson. Happy birthday, Gibson. Cheers to Orville, wherever he may be up in the heavens. But something I noticed immediately was there's no binding on the neck, which, without even having to feel this baseball bat, tells me it's a 1958, because only in 1958 did you not find the binding on the neck. That was a first year ES335. So this is what's considered heavy age from the Murphy Labs. All vintage correct everything. You got 2 custom buckers. And as you can see, you got the aging, the patina on the bridge. You got the aging on the humbuckers that you will see after years and years of play. Indian rosewood fretboard. One thing to bear in mind that make these instruments so much easier to play is that they roll the edges on these so that they actually have that vintage feel. Some people complain that PRS does it, but you pay more to have the Murphy Lab do it because it feels better. Now look at these Klusons. These really look just like they came from 1958. I'm absolutely just astounded, but they still have the meat and potatoes you'd hope so that they're not loose and wonky, and certainly no Bakelite rot, which is sometimes what happens. There's nothing like turning one of these and it just crumbles in your hands. It's a horrifying experience. Look at the checking on this guitar. There's a lot of people that age guitars, but it is an art to age a guitar and make it look real. I mean, look around the edges over here. This is the real wear that you see. And Tom Murphy, these guys have it down to a science. It's absolutely wild how real this feels. So when I asked Matt Kaler, vice president of Gibson, hey dude, why is this so much more? Because the Murphy Lab aged it. He posed a question to me. Benny, have you ever tried to age a guitar? No, Matt, I haven't. Anyone can thrash their guitars, but can you make it actually look like it's a 60-year-old instrument? And I thought about that. Most of the relic instruments I've seen from a lot of other companies, they look terrible. They just look like somebody sat there with a knife, or they were just dinging and danging it with their rings for the sake of it. I've owned, played, and handled thousands of vintage instruments. This looks, feels, and sounds just like a 1958 ES335. And it should, for $8,000. But if you look at a lot of other people doing this aging thing, there's no one doing it like Tom Murphy. The more that I've learned about the Murphy Lab, the more I realize it's not just about, can I thrash my guitar? Because I can thrash my guitar, but I'm not gonna make it look like it's been checking for 60 years myself, unless I have it for 60 years. I can put some damage on it, but it's not gonna be the same as when those Murphy Lab magicians do whatever they do. Pretty much every Murphy Lab guitar I've seen, and almost everything from the custom shop, is it comes with these custom buckers. These are Alnico 2 unpotted pickups. The problem is, with unpotted pickups, if you want to play gent, you want to play some death metal, probably not the guitar for you, because you get a lot more microphonic noise when you don't have potted pickups. Original PAS in a 1958, they're not going to be potted. I dig the sound.
Feels really nice. The neck's thick, but it's not like too fat. Feels good in your hand. Great tone.
So the guitar you're holding is $8,000. And a lot of the people on the internet get really angry about it because you can buy an ES335 for $3,500. What do you think about the Murphy Lab guitar being so expensive by comparison?
It seems like there was definitely a lot of care taken and a lot of attention put into this guitar to make it accurate to what it's supposed to represent. If I had the money, I would say I would spend it on it. It feels like an older guitar. You have a couple of ESs, right?
Yeah, but they're all older.
Isn't that one?
Oh, I have one new one. I do have a 2000s one. It's funny you say that because it's still 24 years old.
Right. But new.
I also want to share in a little bit of the history of the ES335 because Ted McCarty, the head of Gibson during their golden era, and a man that had his hands in so many firsts for Gibson and guitar, said after it was all said and done that the ES335 was his greatest achievement. And that the idea was, the ES, which stands for Electric Spanish, is that he wanted to have an acoustic looking guitar that sounded like a solid body. He took a lot of the thought process from Les Paul and the Log, which was Les Paul's invention of the solid body guitar. Which ironically, this guitar probably has more to do with Les Paul's design of the Log than it does with the actual Les Paul model guitar, which Les only had so much to do with, certainly not as much as someone like Ted McCarty. The funny part was that Ted McCarty, who was responsible for the Flying V, the Modern, which we don't even know if it ever came out, and the Explorer, worried about patenting those guitars because he was afraid Leo Fender would steal those designs. He, quote unquote, knew what Leo would do, but he didn't worry about patenting the ES335 because he wasn't worried about anyone stealing it, because Ted complained that it was expensive to patent a guitar, which also begs the question, why did they patent the Modern if they never made it? If you haven't seen my episode on the mystery of the Great White Buffalo that is the Gibson Modern from the 1950s, go check that out. My buddy Billy Gibbons has a few things to say about it. But it's just interesting that Ted McCarty spent the money to patent the Modern that never came out, but not the ES335. This was around the time that Seth Lover and Walter Fuller were coming up with the PAF humbucking pickup. To buck the hum, to use a second coil so that it wouldn't get so much noise. That 60 cycle hum that you get with single coils. By 1957, they were putting in the ES175. That was technically the first guitar to ever have a PAF. But the 1958 ES335 was one of the first guitars from Gibson that came standard from the very genesis of the guitar model with PAFs. Now the idea with the design of this guitar was basically to have a guitar with wings. You have a center block of hard rock maple. This is where Ted McCarty really looked to Les Paul with the log, except for the fact that it was just goofy looking. I can certainly say that this is a much more beautiful guitar. And it's actually really cool because Gibson is still using the same machine that they did in the 50s to make these guitars.
I like it. It's very responsive. The neck is thick and chunky, but very playable. It doesn't make my hand feel tired or anything like that. It's definitely got like a vintagey tone. I love all the aged hardware stuff. Looks really cool. If you got the money, I'd say it's worth it. I'm just a little upset that I can never afford one. I mean, what are you gonna do? It is what it is.
You can come over to my house.
Yeah, that's all.
Thanks for your time.
Cool, man. Yeah,
I really appreciate you, Paul.
Thank you. Appreciate
Anything you want to say to the people out there?
Hi, Mom.
So Paul's very gracious about the fact that he loves this guitar, but in truth, he'd never be able to afford it. And that's the reason I think so many people get angry. But to be clear, Gibson is the biggest guitar manufacturer. They own 34% of the market. They make guitars for $2,000 and they make guitars for $20,000. Even with inflation, when you have luxury items, they're not as affected because people with disposable incomes will always want to buy things that make them happy and make them feel nice. This is made for somebody who has the disposable income, who appreciates nice things, who doesn't want to spend $60,000 or $100,000 on a guitar, but wants one that plays like one. And I'm gonna be real with you guys. This plays like one. It feels like one. So you can be mad at it all you want, but Tom Murphy, you and your team, you did it. This is as close to the real thing as I've ever seen or played. And it's funny because when I was talking to Tom Murphy last time I was at Gibson, he was telling me that they're gonna be doing Murphy Labs stuff on acoustics. He told me an anecdote of he went out to Bozeman, Montana, and they had showed him some of the Murphy Lab stuff they had done out there, and he fooled himself. Are you gonna show me any of these guitars? This is just the test ones. And it turned out the one he was playing was just a Murphy Lab. The Murphy Lab fooled Tom Murphy. So certainly, if you're fundamentally opposed to the idea of relicing a guitar, buying a fake vintage guitar, spending a ton of money on a new guitar when you could buy a vintage guitar, this is not for you, and I get it, and respect it completely. But if you want an instrument that literally is just like the real thing, just like this is it. If you want it, certainly go to the link down below and see my friends at Sam Ash, who I am so thankful that these guys keep sending me guitars like this. So thank you, Sam Ash. You guys kick ass, and happy 100th birthday to you. 130 for Gibson, 100 for Sam Ash. So the question is it worth it? To which I say, is it worth it to you? If you want to spend $8,000 to get something that looks, sounds, and feels just like a $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 guitar, you certainly could have fooled me. Why don't you smash that subscribe button already?